What is up, bros? With Josh here. In today's video, we're going over the Tier 8 German premium cruiser, the Mainz. This one is going to join the ranks of the Admiral Hipper as well as the Prince Eugen, the other Tier 8 German cruiser. However, this one is still work in progress, so these stats are subject to change and probably will get changed a tad before they go live. So what exactly is the Mainz, as I've called it the Mainz on stream plenty of times to trigger the chat, and it has successfully worked, but apparently it's pronounced the Mainz, so that's what I'll call it throughout the rest of the video. But what does this ship bring to the table? Well, as we've seen both with the Hipper, which is the standard tech tree tier 8, we see the Prince Eugen with having some trade-offs with the losing a little bit of maybe some AA, a little bit of range, but it also gets the heal. The Mainz is going to be a bit more of the glass cannon of these tier 8 ships, meaning that it's going to have smaller calibers, less armor, but it hopefully can do some more damage throughout the entire game, because of its ability to launch more shells out. As we all know, this game is kind of quantity over quality in most situations. But the guns themselves, though, are 150s. As we all know, the German cruisers are kind of characteristic as getting tier 7 and up to having the 203s, that big kind of German AP. This one, however, keeping the low tier ships guns basically in a high tier ship in a tier 8 package. It's kind of weird. This guns that we have seen are ones that you will see both with the Königsberg as well as the Nürnberg. However, we're actually getting the Königsberg version, as you can see right here. The Nürnberg, which is the tier 6, has a 6-second reload on a 10-second or a 10% fire chance. We're actually getting tier 5 guns on a tier 8 ship, and that is 7.5-second reload with an 8% fire chance. The Mainz has these guns. Now you will see a bit of a difference here. 7.5-second reload. Actually quite a slow turret traverse, which doesn't make much sense to me. And some of these values will be changed. We'll go over that in a second. With a 7% fire chance, however, we are using inertia fuse. And then we get that big German quarter pen, which is standard of 37 millimeters, which is pretty solid. It's kind of standard what the 203s would hit. But we have inertia fuse. We were playing with it, so we show the 49. However, though, the guns does show a fairly high AP. So if you're playing this ship and you've played the tier 5, the Königsberg, as well as the Nürnberg, the guns are going to feel pretty normal to that. You're going to get a little bit farther range than you would with those ships. So, but when you'll see when we go over the gameplay, it seems a little lofty for me, and I think that's one of the main things we'll see changed in this ship going forward, hopefully in another version. But this is what we're running: 7.5-second reload on 4 sets of 3, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, of 150 millimeters, and we are actually with inertia fuse getting 49 millimeters of pen. So you may ask why we were going to do that. We'll get to that just in a second. However, let's go over the captain build really quick. This is what I'm running now. The main thing we're kind of testing here is inertia fuse. 37 millimeters is plenty, but we wanted to test it out, and I'll show you what ships we're going to be pretty effective against. Also, we do have a bit of the AA will be affected here. Demo Expert will be affected here. And also, you're going to want extra marksmanship. This is one of the things I hope they change. The turrets are dreadfully slow for something that doesn't feel like the turrets would be that slow. And then concealment. So the rest of the stats here are torpedoes. It's pretty normal. 2 sets of 2 on each, 2 sets of 4 on each side for the German, 6 kilometers. Very standard. The AA is actually pretty solid. You'll see some, we'll shoot down a couple planes, that we did throughout the entire stream of playing this, as we stream all these live on twitch.tv. Maneuverability felt pretty decent for a tier 8 cruiser, so that's no big deal there. And then 12 kilometers on the detection. Now, one of the big things is the armor was nerfed right at the last second of losing that 27 millimeter plating on both the front and the rear, as we would see in like the Hipper and the Prince Eugen. So you're not quite as tanky as those. Like I said, a bit more of a glass cannon. As you see, you lose a lot of this armor here, and you will get pen there. So one of the things, though, we were testing throughout this ship is the inertia fuse and getting that buff. So as you see right here, and through all of this, as we go to like the Prince Eugen, the normal 203s would have the 50 millimeters. That is just straight up with those 203s. The Mainz, even with inertia fuse, doesn't quite get there, but it gets to the 49. Now, some of the things that we were trying to focus on is basically all battleships. So a lot of the USN battleships are stuff we would get advantages to. So if we just click to those, things like the Iowa, anything honestly that's a USN tier 8 and higher is going to give you a nice little bonus here. So you will see some situations that we fight against some USN ships, and we do get a little bit extra HE damage. So this lets us basically do all this extra damage to the armor belt, the upper armor belt, as well as the deck on the USN battleships. This goes all the way up to even tier 10. We will basically get that that full pen damage on that HE, even all the way down to the tier 8s, still the same thing. The deck armor, 38 millimeters, we wouldn't get that damage. So there is some upside to this. I don't know if it's quite worth the 4 points. And also on the Russian ships. So Russian ships, however, obviously get into too high of tiers, it won't matter. But again, breaking that 40 millimeters, so we're stronger against a few ships, mainly battleships, but I don't know if it's quite worth losing the couple extra points for fire chance, but you do get some higher alpha damage. However, I think we will probably see a little bit of a change for its guns, but still, overall, the Mainz is there's some promise here. I will show you the modules we are running on this. So again, this whole video will show us testing the inertia fuse, so you can maybe bump up the fire chance a little bit, but maybe lower the alpha damage. We are running concealment. We are running steering gears as well, so that is affected there. We are as accurate as we can with aiming system. We did buff up this. I tend to do this with test ships because we get focused a bit more with CVs, and then aiming mod 1, and then this is all you get right here. So you get a fighter, you get AA or hydro, and then of course the normal bonus there. So, and this is the camo that comes with it. So let's dive into some gameplay and we'll break down. It's kind of a funny gameplay. I'll tell you what I really think about this ship and what I hope they change going forward into the next version. So here we are in game with the Mainz, and let's just say I hope this ship ends up being good. I think for a long time, and I'm a big Hindenburg fan, I love that ship at tier 10. I think the German cruisers in general, honestly a lot of the German nation probably needs some love, and the cruisers especially in this tier 8. If you've ever been around my stream or seen me playing those ships, I kind of despise the Hipper and the Eugen. I think they are not very good ships. That's just my opinion, of course. This one at least offers a bit of, I would say, a bit more of an exciting playstyle. Hopefully some more alpha, where you trade off for a bit more of survivability. And this one to me kind of seems like, hey, what does it feel like? Well, it kind of feels like a tier 8 Hindenburg. Your ability to potentially pump out damage is there. However, I think the ship really can't pump out damage. You will see these shells. Now, these shells, if you just purely look at the meters per second, is extremely fast. 960 meters per second. However, these are very light shells, so they are super, super floaty. As I said, if you play the tier 5 or the tier 6, the Nuremberg or the Königsberg, they actually don't feel as floaty because the majority of your fights are much closer than what you'll do with this. As a tier 8 cruiser, we all know that you're going to be bottom tiered a lot. This one we just so happen to be top tier, and this is kind of the only way that this version of this ship is at all successful. I mean, it takes a while. Those hang in the air for a decent amount of time. I wouldn't quite call them, you know, USN destroyer bad, but this is definitely a situation of these are floaty, and when I was testing a few ships at the same time, it definitely took us a while to get back into the swing of things. It took us multiple games to kind of get this lofty shell type kind of back in range and getting our kind of lead correct. So this is a bit of a bummer here, but you know, it is what it is. Also, against a couple of these ships, we do see a Massachusetts as well as a Vladi. These are the ships that we were I was excited to play against, because these are the ones that are really going to show if it's worth it or not to take inertia fuse. It's kind of questioned to me. I'm not 100% sure. Is it worth spending 4 points on basically open up your potential alpha damage towards some ships? I don't know if it's worth dropping that fire chance. Base fire chance is really low anyway. You would get a base fire chance of 8%. With Demo Expert, you could get up to 10%. I don't know if that's quite enough to lose all that alpha damage. Just so many more shatters compared to those ships. You'll see us shoot at the Vladi a little bit at the end of the game, but mainly the majority of this game is just kind of us farming some ships. I found this to be kind of funny because this game in general is one that this is about as good as it got, and I kind of wanted to show this because it was almost kind of a joke. This ship really kind of failed at pumping out damage. It doesn't feel like a tier 8 currently. I remember being in a game against the Kutuzov, and it didn't feel like they were the same tier ships. There was a game where I was just getting out damaged by a tier 9 destroyer. I think it was a USS Black versus me, and he just did more damage than I did as a tier 8 cruiser. It was a bit of a bummer. Also, this is the type of game where we're just going to farm a couple battleships that never shoot at us, so that's what you kind of need to have kind of a successful game. This ship, though, they could do a couple of ways. First of all, I think that they really need to lower the trajectory of these shells. These are just so lofty. I think this ship has a lot of potential. I think it would be exciting to have a ship that's kind of more like a tier 8 Hindenburg, because it offers a bit of a trade-off. You're saying, hey, you're willing to pump out more damage, but I'm willing to give up some of that survivability. If you look at something like the Eugen is kind of a tanky boy compared to this thing. You have a bit more armor since you traded off that 27mm. I think you even have a bit more life, just off the top of my head, and also you have those heals. So as a tier 7 premium, you're kind of this in between, right? The Hipper has a little bit better here and there. The Eugen kind of trades a little bit, and this kind of offers a bit of you know, a bit of a more glass cannon, as I keep referring to. This could be fun. I think it could be, and it has some pretty solid AA on this ship, as well as we don't have any CVs in this game, but we did see this. Now, again, this ship will do quite well. I wanted to show off the AP. Now, the AP is quite solid, close. This is going to be that speed of those shells. So that's almost a 10k salvo on a broadside ship. So if you want to do well in this, just find a nice Nagato that's going to sail broadside at you at 6 kilometers, so you can unload some freaking AP salvos at 7.5 seconds, not including adrenaline rush. Then you can farm a bunch of damage. So, but I mean, how often are you actually going to get this? So, and we go here. So the AP is still pretty solid, but this is a situation where this ship is going to kind of need to be close to get into that advantage, and that's something that's really tough at high tiers to say, hey, I need to be close to do damage. Yeah, it's kind of brutal. So the next little part about this game is not super exciting. The team is running away, and with this shell being so lofty, there's only so much we can do. But while we have this dip in action for a bit, as it will get kind of exciting in here in just a tad, what do I think they should do with this ship? Well, first of all, I think they need to increase its combat effectiveness just a ton. The only time we were able to really kind of get some good games is when we were top tiered, and if, you know, we had situations like that Nagato. Other than that, this thing struggles to do damage. A lot of hits for not a lot of damage, and a lot of just meh. I would have much rather been in basically any other tier 8. Even in some situations, there was one game where it's like, man, as somebody that doesn't like the Hipper like I do, I was like, I would have rather been in the Hipper in this situation compared to the Mainz, because the damage just we would have been able to farm. It was a spot where we only having, I think, a 7% fire chance with the inertia fuse build we were going, not being able to really light fires, but also in some situations not really even getting the alpha damage that we would expect. You know, 4, 5, 6 shell hits for 2,000 damage, that's not out of the ordinary. So they could do a couple things with this. First of all, increase the speed of the shell, make it not so floaty, and, you know, probably have a decent little ship there, maybe increase the fire chance a little bit, I'm not sure, but I think just making the shells more effective. I mean, just being able to fire shells fairly quickly, I think, is probably good enough to carry this ship. You know, it offers this kind of faster firing alternative to the Hipper and the Eugen. Or they could basically leave the ship as is and kind of give it the same process as, so I'm trying to hoard this AFK Gneisenau to myself. So yeah, if you can just find a game where you have a Ismail that lets you farm all game, you have a Nagato that doesn't shoot you at 6 kilometers, and an AFK Gneisenau, you can actually get some decent results in this ship. But yes, back to what I think they should probably do. First of all, help the guns out. I think it's fine lacking the armor. I think it's fine having some other situations where maybe you don't quite have the effectiveness of survivability compared to the Hipper and the Eugen, but help the guns out. The guns need some help. They just don't do any damage. There's no reason to really do this. I mean, there are so many spots where if I was in a Mogami, if I was in a Miyoko, if I was in so many of these other ships, it would have just been so much easier. Also, this is where we kind of show off. Again, the ship will do pretty well close range, but it's getting in there and then also not really having the armor to really go for it. But they could do what they did to the Z39. And the Z39, if you don't remember, was originally a tier 8 ship. It has the tier 8 module, and that was the plan for this ship at first, was for it to be a tier 8 destroyer. However, it didn't quite work, and they kind of scrapped it, but then they gave it a tier 7 slot. And what I mean by that is they made it a tier 7. I think this ship could actually be okay at tier 7. They might even need to nerf it a tad, maybe nerf the reload a tad and make it a tier 7. I don't think that would be the worst thing. You offer this cruiser that's probably all right in a tier that's really fun, that maybe doesn't have the best guns. I think that could easily work. That's kind of my idea is what they should do with this, because what we see right now just won't compete. But I think it could be pretty fun. You offer kind of what we've seen in a kind of what we've seen in the IGN battleships is we see kind of like stock versions of ships in lower tiers. I don't think this would be the worst thing at tier 7. I think having a tier 8 ship that's a bit more of a spammy version of a Hipper might be kind of cool too. So whatever they end up going for, I think there's definitely potential. But I think we could see kind of what this ship is right now at tier 7. You'd end up dropping inertia fuse because you just really wouldn't need it as much anymore, and you could kind of just have the ship as is. This is a fairly high AA ship with a fairly high reload for German cruisers, and you could have this unique style of gameplay. Again, I think they probably need to nerf some stuff, maybe nerf the reload a little bit, add a second or two, and you kind of probably be fine. But overall, as a tier 8, this ship is just very, very underwhelming. I think it took me 7 or 8 games. I think we played it 7 or 8 games on stream, and I think we had 2 games over 100k. Again, you guys saw how I got my damage this game. Basically, AFK battleships and other battleships not shooting at you. So, yeah, that's kind of how you need this ship to be really successful. I try to find a scenario where this thing excels, and you can't really find it besides shooting at stuff that's lower tier than you. So that's not the best thing as a tier 8 premium, as if this does stay a tier 8 premium, it's going to have a fairly high price tag, and you want something that's unique. As in my opinion, as some of already with the Eugen and the Hipper, those ships kind of need some love. So adding a ship that's a little bit weaker than those, probably not the best idea. But again, tons of potential. I'm excited to see what happens with this ship. I think they could go one of two ways. Again, then that's going to be either hitting up the guns, making them more effective at tier 8, or I think they could really do the Z39 effect and drop it down to tier 7 and make a fun ship there. I think tier 7 ships are a prime. I think it's more of the fun part of that game. I think there's really good maps, and this ship could be quite effective there. So, you know, we'll see what it goes. Again, work in progress. The stats are subject to change. However, this is the Vladi, so again, we can do all this damage against the deck now. So whatever we get for kind of full pens here, outside of hitting the superstructure, is just added damage. So this is kind of a decent little showing here, as we're going to go finish this Ismail, the one shot, one opportunity on this, and then we'll just focus on this guy again. So I'm not sure. I kind of want to do some testing with the mines without inertia fuse, but I feel like what we see right here probably just isn't the final version, so it's almost kind of feels like a waste to keep testing it. It's just so underwhelming. But opening up some extra alpha damage against both the Vladi and the USN ships, as well as the Lenin was added in there. I think once you get up to the Soyuz and the Kremlin, it was pretty ineffective. But adding some big battleships onto getting more damage on those ships is pretty strong. So I'm not quite sure if it's worth it. Like, that's a salvo right there. We had 7 pens. Probably would have had a lot more shatters. So, you know, who knows? Is the 2% fire chance that we would get instead kind of worth it? Actually, 3% fire chance. Is that going to be worth it? We are shooting a lot of shells. You know, I'm not quite sure. So this is going to take a bit more testing. Again, this is with inertia fuse, giving us, instead of the 37mm penetration, we are now up to 49. We don't quite break that 50mm, but we do get a little bit more, which opens us up to some targets. Again, some pretty solid penetrations there. So we had 7 on that salvo, but as you saw, the overall damage on this ship is kind of meh. You know, it was seven full pens and one shatter for like 2,500 damage. That was kind of the story of this ship, and he even felt pretty underwhelming. I think there was one time where I had 20 in one of the games. I think 20 full pens on a destroyer for like 7,000 damage. As a cruiser, that felt so demoralizing. As you see right there, full pen for 281 damage. That is something that kind of sucks. So I hope they kind of give that some life. But I ended up having a decent little game. Well, the outcome was kind of from a goofy source because of AFK ships and, you know, battleship sailing broadside, but overall pretty solid, 160,000 damage. The joke in the stream was that we scored a higher enough damage that it'll maybe show that it's overpowered, and maybe they'll even nerf it. LOL in the chat. But anyways, the tier 8 Mainz, the tier 8 German cruiser, I feel like has a ton of potential, and there's a lot they could do with it, but what we have right now definitely needs some love. So anyways, guys, that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys this time.